Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz has the evening off. On the show tonight,
they're not cargo. They are not chattel. They're human beings.
A national immigration fight lands on Chicago's welcome mat as Texas sends a busload of migrants to the city. Mayor Lightfoot extended and expanded the curfew for teens. WTTW News looks into whether it's made downtown safer.
All conflicts of interest are taken care of by virtue of the blind trust and the safeguards that we put in place.
A new investigative report looks into Governor Pritzker's blind trust in state contracts. How the East Side community got its start and how it's faring now amid COVID. We have a live report. And with rents skyrocketing in a competitive housing market, rental scams are on the rise. We'll talk about how to avoid getting taken in.
As a kid, you'd love to draw, and it was something that I was so geared towards all the time because it would be things that it would keep me busy.
Meet a local visual artist bringing culture and community to Wrigley Field. And exploring the artworks of Paul Cezanne with curators at the Art Institute.
And Brandis, as you mentioned, I'm in the East Side community as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Now, it's known for its blue-collar working-class community with a rich industrial history. It's also set to host Chicago's Labor Day Parade this weekend since 2019. We'll hear from leaders addressing environmental concerns and much more. But first, I send it back to you.
Joanna, thank you. And now to some of today's top stories. Some local officials and nonprofits are welcoming some 75 immigrants bused to Chicago by Texas Governor Greg Abbott and vowing to provide them with resources. The buses carrying the immigrants, most of whom arrived in the U.S. after fleeing Venezuela, made it to the city late Wednesday.
The 75 people who arrived in Chicago last night have been through weeks and even months of difficult, frightening travel to make a better life for their families. They deserve so much more than being villainized as Governor Abbott's political pawns, and we will make sure they are treated with basic human dignity.
Mayor Lori Lightfoot says the Texas governor's move was an attempt to embarrass Democratic mayors for supporting President Joe Biden. We have more on this story in just a few minutes. The Chicago Department of Public Health is advising residents to get the updated COVID-19 vaccine as soon as they can. CDPH could receive its first doses of the updated vaccine as early as Tuesday. These updated vaccines are formulated to provide immunity against the Omicron variants BA4 and 5, which account for nearly all COVID cases in the U.S.
2 months ago, Omicron looked really different than it looks right now. And the reason I very much want folks to get this now is because it's such a good match for the BA4-5 that is predominant.
Already cautioned that low uptake of the new vaccine could allow yet another variant to emerge. The Bears will reveal plans for their new Arlington Heights Stadium on September 8th. That's according to a statement from the team. The team says the meeting will detail, quote, one of the largest development projects in Illinois state history. They'll be taking over the former Arlington racetrack site and creating what the organization calls a transit-oriented mixed-use entertainment district. In September, the team announced it had inked a purchasing agreement for the racetrack. However, that deal still hasn't closed after nearly a year. Up next, more on those 75 migrants who were dropped off in Chicago, courtesy of the Texas governor. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Chicago is laying out the welcome mat for migrants from Central America by way of Texas. They arrived in the city late last night. It's part of a new practice in which Texas is effectively shipping immigrants that have illegally crossed into the United States to sanctuary cities like Chicago. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Brandis, it's unclear actually how many individuals were on that chartered bus. Governor Greg Abbott's office puts the number at 95 and says that they come from countries including Colombia, Cuba, Nicaragua, Panama, Peru, and Venezuela, and says that all of these individuals voluntarily signed a waiver form that was available in multiple languages, acknowledging that they wanted to come to Chicago. Chicago area elected officials have put that number at 75 and say really most were from Venezuela. Well, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot says that Texas Republican Greg Abbott did not coordinate at all with the city. She says Chicago, as well as the state and nonprofits working in this space, were prepared that something like this could be coming soon because Texas has recently likewise bused migrants to sanctuary cities run by Democrats, including New York and Washington, D.C. So Chicago was ready, therefore, to greet these individuals. Families, some kids, pregnant women with trauma-informed and culturally competent care.
Many have walked miles just to get here, and so the healthcare needs that they have is great. When these individuals made it to our care, they were greeted with food, shelter, clothing, clean towels, and a shower.
The National Immigrant Justice Center is part of that rapid response team working with those new arrivals by reviewing their documents, and in time we'll begin to work with them on the next legal steps. But first come more acute needs, including building trust and assurance, says the center's director, Mary Meg McCarthy.
People are very traumatized. I mean, some people didn't even know where they were when they arrived here. And, we provided a packet of materials, and in that packet, we included a map, and a map of Illinois, of Chicago, but then a big United States map, so they have a sense of where they are in this country.
In a statement released last night, Abbott said that making Chicago a drop-off location is part of his response to President Biden's open border policies overwhelming border communities in Texas. He says that Mayor Lori Lightfoot loves to tout the responsibility of her city to welcome all regardless of legal status. And I look forward to seeing this responsibility in action as these migrants receive resources from a sanctuary city with the capacity to serve them. Now, Rodney Scott worked for the Border Control for nearly 30 years, rising to the position of chief under former President Donald Trump, and then staying on under the Biden presidency until Biden forced him out of that job late last summer, and Scott retired. Now, Scott is with a conservative think tank in Texas. He says that the nation's southern border is in chaos and that agents are overwhelmed.
There's a complete crisis on the border, chaos. We talk about the people, but what that does is it really gives the cartel cover that they can smuggle anything they want into the United States as well. So this is a huge national security risk. It's not just about immigration.
He says that Abbott is responding to a crisis, that this is triage.
Del Rio, Texas, where a lot of this is happening, the entire population is 35,000 people. That means you could put the entire city in Wrigley Field and still have 6,000 empty seats. Yet they are dealing with over 40,000 migrants coming into their community, illegal aliens coming into their community every month. Just from a Chicago perspective, forget about nationality for a minute and just think about 40,000 people that are in a transient type situation. They are homeless, trying to ingest them into a community like Del Rio. The governor had to do something.
Scott says that it is hypocrisy for places like Chicago and Illinois that have adopted sanctuary status for undocumented immigrants to then complain. But Lightfoot says that she isn't complaining. She says that if Abbott's goal was to humiliate Chicago and President Biden by trying to create a chaotic situation, it didn't happen. She says that she understands the concerns of states on the southern border like Texas and Arizona, but she says in this case, Abbott approached it all wrong.
Because this is about a cheap political point. It has nothing to do with sharing the load. That's not what this is about. And I don't want anybody to mistake his actions as being anything other than what they are, which is inhumane, unpatriotic, and a cheap political stunt.
And immigration rights attorneys say that individuals and families whose lives are endangered in their home countries have a right to seek asylum in the United States.
It's really disappointing to see national leaders using such racist, anti-immigrant rhetoric. And that's what that was from the governor, in my opinion. Our policies, our laws relating to immigrants and refugees shouldn't be by state or city by city, but this is a national policy. This is reflective of who we are as a country, welcoming those who are in need of safety and security.
Now, Governor Abbott is in a race for re-election right now against Democrat Beto O'Rourke. In a statement, Abbott's office says that President Biden has turned a blind eye to Texan suffering. But Illinois Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia says that if Abbott had tried to work with Biden, he might have received more help and things might have gone smoother. Garcia also blames former President Trump's policies for creating this backup and then the current surge.
Is there a cost to migrants coming to these localities? Yes, because you have to provide food and shelter and other services to them. But there's a proud history of that in Chicagoland and in Illinois.
Mayor Lightfoot was unable to put a dollar figure on the cost to Chicago to care for these individuals, as well as for additional migrants that officials are expecting Texas to be sending to Chicago in the future. Meanwhile, Congressman Garcia says he just returned last week from a trip into Colombia, and he says that part of the solution is going to be resolving border crises in Central America. And he says that that is part of the root cause as well of the current crisis. With that, Brenda, back to you.
Amanda, thank you. And now we head to the far southern corner of the city to an industrial neighborhood, a community connected by the Calumet River and Lake Michigan. For this week's In Your Neighborhood, Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez and producer Acacia Hernandez are in Chicago's East Side community to learn more about the area's past and present. Joanna, tell us how this neighborhood got its name.
And Brandis, I learned quite a bit about the neighborhood. To start off, the community got its name from its location on the east side of the Calumet River. And as you mentioned, the neighborhood is an industrial corridor. It has a long history that dates back decades with the arrival of steel mills that drove hundreds of immigrants to move to the area to work and build. We started by talking to a longtime resident who tells us more about the economic impact of the steel mills shutdown.
Once the steel mills left and everything else started, like, I guess you could say, falling apart in the area. There was always people in need, always. Single mothers, kids just trying to get on their own and everything like that.
Rosemary Arias now runs a food pantry along 114th Street. She founded the pantry 3 years ago, where she says her team serves up to 160 families every Wednesday. She shares the pantry as a labor of love for her community in a time of need when high food prices are impacting families more than ever. She also runs a mobile food pantry every month and currently operates on donations.
We have people that still have full-time jobs, but they still can't meet their family's needs, so they come here. Some, they're homeless. We have to serve them also. There's a way we register them. I've seen so many different factions. It hurts. It hurts to see the community like this.
Residents we spoke with described the neighborhood as a working-class family community, a melting pot of many nationalities. Today, the neighborhood is 80% Latino. Imar Alaya, the owner of Shy Burger Baby, tells us a story of his mother fleeing El Salvador in the 70s and settling in the east side with his siblings. Alaya started as a food runner and worked his way around kitchens in Chicago and around the world. A year ago, he opened his own restaurant where he essentially does it all.
It's always thinking about her, the hard work, the effort, the American dream that everybody keeps talking about. It may sound like a cliche, but it's true. I grew up in this neighborhood. I came from this neighborhood. I wanted to put this place in this neighborhood, nowhere else.
Today, the community is home to a bustling port along the Calumet River and has multiple bridges and factories. It's home to South Shore Recycling, among other industrial companies. We spoke to a local activist who grew up in the east side and tells us about the health challenges the neighborhood faces.
To be talking about what happens when you live in an industrial corridor. There are many different factors that affect you. There are heat waves, there is damage to infrastructure and flooding, and there is an environmental burden, right? There is a cost. We have high respiratory issues, we have high rates of cancer. We see this in our community members.
Oscar Sanchez works as Southeast Environmental Task Force, an organization driven by bringing environmental awareness and education to the community. He says their work consists of fighting against racial disparities by getting youth involved.
We co-founded the Southeast Youth Alliance because we felt there was this negative stigma from community members, and you felt that. And when you see your community as a dumping site and you say, well, this is a dumping site, there's nothing good here in the Southeast side, that creates a mental health barrier. Then you see many community members saying, hey, no, I'm going to fight this stigma. I'm going to introduce arts. I'm going to introduce food. I'm going to introduce my passion here in the community.
The neighborhood is also getting ready to bring back the Chicago Labor Day Parade for the first time since the start of the pandemic. Take a look at some of the past parade pictures. This year, the Chicago Federation Labor Organization merged with the Alderman's office to work together to organize the celebration. We met with the president of the Labor Federation, who says they will be recognizing the hundreds of union members in Chicago.
We're super excited. The parade kicks off at 12 o'clock this Saturday. The Saturday of Labor Day weekend, and at 1 o'clock, our festival, Eddie Fest, starts 1 o'clock, goes till 6, features a union band called Union Rules. Union Rules is made up of union musicians from the Chicago Federation of Musicians. We're going to have other entertainment. We're going to have bouncy houses, family activities.
And the parade will be ending here at Eggers Grove. Just take a look at this beautiful forest preserve. Actually, a local resident just told me that this bike path used to be a railroad track, and look how it looks like now. And coming up, we speak with the local alderwoman. But first, I send it back to you, Brandis.
Joanna, thank you. A new report shows Governor J.B. Pritzker's vast investment portfolio includes a dozen companies that earned billions of dollars in state contracts. When he took office, Pritzker promised to shift that portfolio into a blind trust to eliminate conflicts of interest. But an investigation from the Better Government Association throws into question whether or not the move worked. Joining us now is David Jackson, senior investigative reporter for the Better Government Association. David, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, Brandis. Thank you.
First, give us an overview of what you found during your investigation, please.
Well, the big finding was about the governor's promise, which you outlined. When he took office in 2019, Governor Pritzker pledged that he would divest his very substantial investment portfolio of companies that did business with the state. And he said he would put the remaining assets into what he called a blind trust. Our investigation scrubbed the governor's ethics statements since 2019, and we found that there were 12 stock investments that the governor and his trust made that were with companies that held contracts or did business with the state. We also found that 3 of them directly lobbied or registered to lobby Governor Pritzker. And in one case, we found substantial interactions between that company and Governor Pritzker and his office.
So you just talked about those 3 state contractors that Pritzker and his trust invested in, but they were also registered to lobby. Is there sort of a system that's supposed to prevent that from happening?
No, it's really the pledge that we are looking at. The governor again promised to insulate himself from what he called even the appearance of a conflict of interest. And he does file an annual ethics report that lists all of the holdings, we hope, in his trust. And those companies also register to lobby. So this is not really a story about quid pro quo per se. It's a story about his promise to, again, divest his holdings of companies that did business with the state and put his remaining holdings into a blind trust. We talked to leading experts in trust law around the country, and they said, well, if it's if the governor knew what he put into his trust when he created it, and then by law had to report what was in it every year, it's hardly a blind trust.
Okay, so elaborate a little bit, please, on specifically Centene Corporation and their involvement with Medicaid contracts, because as you detailed, Pritzker met with their CEOs regularly.
We looked in depth at one of these deals, Brandis. As you can imagine, the big question for us is, does it really matter if the governor owns stock in a company that does business with the state? Is it material to that company? Is it material to the governor's portfolio? And there was one case that we decided to really delve into in depth, and that was, as you mentioned, the case of Centene Corporation. This is a large multinational Medicaid contractor that, since the governor has taken office, has done business with the state that totals $20.6 billion. So it's a giant contractor. And we found that the corporation had three lobbying firms who were registered specifically to lobby Governor Pritzker, as well as 5 additional lobbying firms that were registered to lobby his office and the state agencies involved. And we obtained emails from the FOIA, and we looked at the governor's schedule, and we found that Centene and its top executives met with the governor on 2 occasions, as Centene really needed the sign-off and the help of the governor's office. At the time, this big, giant company was facing federal antitrust concerns over a merger it was trying to put into effect. And Illinois was one of the crucial states where Centene needed to move some of its Medicaid patients to other firms so as not to have a market concentration that would trigger antitrust violations. Illinois helped the company do that by signing off on deals that transferred patients to other companies. And obviously the governor's office was involved in that.
So, David, we did get a statement from the governor, and it reads, quote, "As we have said numerous times and is made clear in the documents prepared by the attorneys, Governor Pritzker's trust is blind. Yet again, the BGA seems to be suggesting that because the governor is following the law, he is doing something wrong." David, how has the Pritzker administration responded to your investigation?
Well, that statement went on to say that the BGA continues to have trouble understanding the basic facts. And Brandis, I agree wholeheartedly with that part of the statement. The facts are very hard to understand, and that is precisely why we did share our reporting with leading U.S. law professors. We continued to dig out records from public sources, and we presented everything we found to the Pritzker team. The findings that we have are difficult to understand. Again, I think most simply they have to do with the pledge and the promise Governor Pritzker made when he took office. He said that he was going to divest his vast investment portfolio of companies that did business with the state. We found 5 companies that were still in his investment portfolio, and he said he was going to further insulate himself against the appearance of conflict of interest by imposing a blind trust. Again, Brandis, we talked to experts who said, well, if the governor knows what he put in that trust and the governor has to report every year what's in that trust, then it's hardly blind.
It's not that blind, is it? Okay, David Jackson, Better Government Association. That's where we'll have to leave it. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, the Chicago Cubs organization is combining sport and art in a new project. Stay with us for a look.
We've made it. Justice Jackson's appointment to the Supreme Court provides a beacon of hope.
Black women are underrepresented. We still rise. We still show up for one another.
It's us investing in the next generation and giving them something to enrich the next generation with.
And there's much more ahead on the program, including more from Chicago's East Side community as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. But first, a Chicagoland artist is making his Wrigley Field debut with a sculpture meant to encourage community. Arts correspondent Angel Ito introduces us to Cohere, and the visual artists behind the Bronze Beast.
From my backyard in the suburbs to a stadium, Wrigley Field, it's just crazy.
From Bloomingdale to Wrigley Field, for the last 5 years, Luis de Guzman has been working full-time as a visual artist, creating art of all mediums. And while made from different materials, the message behind his work has remained the same.
And when my family came here from the Philippines, their direct connection to community and culture was through sports.
De Guzman continues to bridge that gap between culture and community in his latest statue, Cohere, for the Chicago Cubs.
It always stemmed from this, the OG Angry Cub logo, but my whole thing is like I've always been attracted to the bear logo because it's like, it's on the OG classic jerseys. It's something that you really don't look at. It's just right there on the arm. And for me, when I saw it, I was like, it looks like he's trying to break out of this sphere or his own box. How can I like bring that into real life and that idea? Because the work we create, I'm about like, you know, I call it in between the lines. It's about like bringing your best stuff out, pulling yourself up through situations that you're going through, but like preparing for what's to happen in the future. And I think for me, it's like, how can I give that messaging, not just for like an iconic sports team, but like through it all for more than just beyond sport, but for community people like who may not understand sports but still understand the message behind the sculpture.
And while he didn't know exactly what the end result would be, de Guzman says the process of bringing the idea from the screen to reality is a creative step he's appreciated since he started.
I could actually see something on more than just a screen or a piece of paper. Like I could see it on like a t-shirt. It's like we're the big kids, and being able to like bring ideas into life is so beautiful to me.
Nearly 2 years later, with the help of a partnering company to build the 5-foot statue, de Guzman was able to bring Cohere to life.
So this is polystone. So the mini one's polystone. The one at Wrigley is electroplated bronze. Wow. So it's about, you know, 700 pounds of electroplated bronze. It's super dense, but it's basically all welded bronze, and then they like shock it to get that like shiny paint looking mirror effect on it.
With future Cubs collaborations on the horizon, the message behind de Guzman's work will remain the same.
I create with purpose, and that purpose is to like not only represent my roots, but like represent everybody, be inclusive, and just bring people together through art.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And you can see Cohere at Wrigley Field, now in the gift shop at the Cubs' next home game, September 6th. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, the numbers on Mayor Lightfoot's extended curfew. We find out how many teens were ticketed and whether the curfew made downtown safer. Chicago's Labor Day Parade returns to the East Side community. We're one-on-one with the local alderwoman on that and much more. With rents skyrocketing and a competitive housing market, rental scams are on the rise. We talk about how to avoid getting taken in. And color, form, and space create harmony in the paintings of Paul Cezanne featured at the Art Institute. But first, some more of today's top stories. R. Kelly will not testify in his own defense at his Chicago trial. Attorneys for Kelly and his co-defendants began calling witnesses today. One of the co-defendants, Milton June Brown, also will not testify. However, the third, Daryl McDavid, is planning to do so. The prosecution rested its case Tuesday after calling more than 20 witnesses over 2 weeks. You can read more about the trial on our website. The Chicago Department of Public Health is reporting the first case of a West Nile virus for a Chicagoan this year. Health officials say the individual is a male in his mid-60s and was hospitalized. For the 2021 season, CDPH reported 13 human cases and no deaths. Officials say the best way to prevent infection is to use insect repellent, wear long sleeves, and eliminate standing water. And CDPH is advising residents to get the updated COVID-19 vaccine as soon as they can. Chicago could receive its first doses of the updated vax as early as Tuesday. These updated vaccines are formulated to provide immunity against the Omicron variants BA4 and 5, which account for nearly all COVID cases in the U.S.
2 months ago, Omicron looked really different than it looks right now. And the reason I very much want folks to get this now is because it's such a good match for the BA4-5 that is predominant.
Already cautioned that low uptake of the new vaccine could allow yet another variant to emerge. Local pickleball players will be pleased by the parks. To meet the boom in the sport's popularity, Chicago Park District officials say they plan to build 50 new pickleball courts by 2025, adding to the nearly 80 existing ones. The plan includes development of 3 regional facilities that'll have the capacity to host tournaments. A WTTW News analysis of the city's extended and expanded teen curfew, touted by the mayor as a way to put an end to a spate of downtown violence among young Chicagoans, has only been used 4 times in 3 months over this summer. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with a look at her analysis. Welcome back, Heather, and remind us how and why the city's curfew was changed back in May.
Well, for 30 years, the city's curfew only applied to teens younger than 16 and let them stay out until 11 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. That changed in May as the mayor struggled to respond to, as you said, a spate of very violent incidents downtown and pushed the city council successfully to broaden the use of the teen curfew law in an attempt to stop those incidents.
Okay, so what did your analysis find then?
Well, only 4 times did police officers find a violation of the city's curfew between 10 and 11 p.m. on a Friday or Saturday, and no 17-year-olds were found to have violated the city's curfew at any point between mid-May and mid-August. That means that only 3% of the city's curfew violations in that time period was triggered by the mayor's expanded law at a time when the police were really stepping up their use of the curfew, increasing violations by 57% in 2022 as compared to 2021.
Was this a surprising finding for the mayor or to those who oppose the expansion and the extension of the curfew?
Well, the mayor's office did not respond to my requests for comment, but this expansion was vehemently opposed by the ACLU and progressive alder people, all of whom told me that they were not surprised that this expansion did not seem to have a big impact because during the debate, the mayor's administration could not present data that would show it would be effective. So they said it's what they expected.
Okay. And of course, we can find out more of Heather's story on our website. That's at WTTW.com/news. Meanwhile, Heather Sharon, as always, thank you.
Thanks, Brandis.
And now to Joanna Hernandez, who spent the day in Chicago's East Side community as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Joanna.
Brandis, earlier today, I spoke with the alderwoman of the 10th Ward, Susan Sedlowski Garza. She brought back the Chicago Labor Day Parade a few years ago, and we began by asking her what she's looking forward to as the parade kicks off this weekend.
I'm looking forward to celebrating our working class all across the city. We have over close to almost 90 units in the parade this year. We're coming back with a vengeance. It's really a celebration of the hardworking men and women across the city of Chicago, and I'm really proud of that.
You just talked a little bit about that. What is, again, the importance of having this parade here? Because I know it's merging.
Yeah, it is merging. So when I was a kid growing up, we had 9 steel mills here. And every year, Labor Day was the biggest celebration in the 10th Ward that we ever saw. We had 125,000 steel workers in District 31. So everybody was in the parade and the whole community came out for this. And once the mills closed, the parade stopped. When I took office in 2015, we brought the parade back in 2016, culminating in a fest. The Chicago Federation of Labor actually merged with us to do it. They renamed the fest Eddie Fest after my dad, Edward Sedlowski. So this is personal for me. It also brings back a sense of community, a sense of pride as we celebrate the men and women who work tirelessly for the people of the city of Chicago.
And talking about your father, he was a labor activist and a steel worker.
Mm-hmm.
I can only assume that he was also some inspiration for you.
My father was a huge inspiration to me. I learned a lot of valuable lessons from him. He worked tirelessly in this neighborhood as president of Local 65, and he taught me to do the same. And I do feel I stand on the shoulders of giants, but I think that my dad would be really proud of the work that we've done here.
What is something that you would say that maybe the person who never comes to the East Side doesn't know about this neighborhood?
So the East Side is somewhere we have such wonderful amenities here. We have Big Marsh Bike Park. We have Wolf Lake State Park. We have beautiful beaches. We are the only ward that borders another state. Some of the best people, the hardest working people I've ever met come from this ward. And I'm proud of our blue collar heritage here, and so are the other people. So is everybody that lives here.
Now, because this is an industrial corridor, what would you say are some of the environmental efforts that your office has put in place throughout the years?
So we work tirelessly to instill legislation that protects our constituents. There is a lot of industry here, but you have to realize too, the Calumet River is a working river. It's the only way to the St. Lawrence Seaway. We have boats from Stockholm and Poland and Korea, from everywhere that come through our rivers. We have 5 movable bridges. It's the most movable bridges next to downtown. This is something, almost 9,000 people work along the river from 92nd to 137th. We have the Illinois Port Authority that's on our river. So we are a true working river, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that.
This is a melting pot as well.
This is a melting pot. We have Korean, Croatian, Italian, white, black, brown, Asian. We have a huge Haitian population. I'm very proud of the melting pot of the 10th Ward. It's always been that because people migrated here to come and work in the steel mills when the 9 of them were open. So, and people are actually starting to come back as well.
And I can see generations. We spoke to some people who remember their grandparents, their great-grandparents working here. It just seems like people stay here.
Well, it's a great neighborhood. I bring people here and they're like, wow, I can't even believe I'm still in the city of Chicago. There's so many wonderful amenities. We're the only ward that borders another state. 6 blocks to the east is Indiana, but we're a very close-knit, tight community, and the people here are amazing.
And I want to quickly ask you, you recently supported a cleaning co-op, Mujeres Brillantes. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, exciting. It's our second cooperativa that we're opening. The first ones that we started was women run as well. They're making and bottling salsa. This is a cleaning service. I have to give a huge shout out to Ana Guajardo from Centro Trabajar Unidos. She has worked tirelessly to get this done. She's in the process of building a workers' rights center with a cooperative kitchen in the basement.
Again, that was Alderwoman Garza of the 10th Ward. And coming up, we speak to a local businesswoman and a teacher from the community. But first, I send it back to you.
Joanna, thanks. We'll see you again in a little bit. Up next, what to know about rental scams in a conversation that originally aired on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. But first, a look at the weather. A tight housing market and rising interest rates are shutting out many would-be home buyers. That's put the squeeze on Chicago's rental market. According to city data, 60% of Chicagoans live in rental properties. A June report by real estate platform Domu finds the median rent for one-bedroom apartments in Chicago is up 8% since January. And competition for apartments is intense, leaving the city's renters, which includes many Black Chicagoans, as more vulnerable targets for scammers and shady landlords. Here to talk about what to look out for and how to protect yourself are Dennis Horton, director of the Rockford Regional Office of the Chicago Better Business Bureau, and Michelle Gilbert, legal and policy director of the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. Thanks to you both for joining us. Dennis Horton, let's start with you, please. What are some common scams that renters might encounter right now?
Well, what happens generally is that people looking for apartments will go online and find what they think is the perfect apartment property for them. They'll see great pictures with great amenities and low rents, and that's where the trouble begins.
What happens after that? They see these pictures, the sort of a scam, and then what do they run into?
They see the pictures, they see the scams. They talk to a landlord who they never actually will be in contact with other than usually through emails or text messages. And then they're asked to complete an application, pay the deposit, first month's rent, and then they do all of those things and they never hear from that landlord again.
And it turns out the alleged landlord was masquerading basically as someone who had the rights and the ownership to rent that apartment, which is actually not even theirs. Michelle Gilbert, who's the most vulnerable to rental scams?
Well, certainly people who are having a hard time finding housing. And we have litigated these cases where someone holds him or herself out to be an agent for the landlord and sometimes even has keys, allows a tenant to move in. The tenant will pay rent, and before they know it, they're getting a notice that the person that they've been dealing with is not the agent for the property. And then they're forced out of the property, forced to be evicted in very short order. And of course it happens, just as you said, because the rental market is so tight right now.
Dennis Horton, what responsibility do owners have, though, to avoid scams being perpetrated using their properties? Is there anything they can do?
Owners should also make sure that they are checking online to make sure that their properties aren't being posted without their knowledge. That's when people go to online methods to find properties, they don't know that the one that's being posted there isn't legitimate.
Michelle, what are some of the most common complaints about landlords you see in your work?
Well, of course, we're the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. So we talk to a lot of tenants who are having problems getting conditions repaired, but tenants do have rights. And we shared some resources that will be posted on this website with places where tenants can turn to learn those rights from the city or county government, our office. Also, if people are looking at apartments, of course, we have to follow the old rule that our grandmothers taught us that if something seems to be good to be true, it probably is. So, go with your gut if you think that there are any questions. But there are places to verify as well. The Cook County Tax Portal can be searched with just an address, and a tenant could check to see whether the name that the county has listed is the same name as the person that they're dealing with. And they shouldn't be afraid to ask questions.
Dennis, what's your advice for how to avoid these scams?
The number one thing to do is when you're asked to pay those deposits, that if you're asked to pay through an online app like Venmo or Zelle, you are dealing with a scammer. Also, make sure that you, as a tenant, that you do look online for that address. If you search online for that address and it pops up again, you'll know that it's being used as a scam property. And make sure that you go see the property in person. You don't want to just take the word of someone who you haven't actually met, because very often these purported landlords give you an excuse for why they can't meet with you, that they're out of town, or that the property, I have several different people who are looking for this property, so you need to hop on it right now or you're going to lose out. Make sure that you are being proactive and going and seeing the property. And if you knock on the door and someone opens that door and says it's not for rent, then you have saved yourself possibly identity theft and losing a lot of money.
Yeah, it's going to be a big red flag, obviously. Michelle, what advice do you have for tenants who are looking for housing and they might have evictions on their record?
Exactly. Thanks so much for asking that question. First of all, I would caution landlords not just to rely on the fact that an eviction was filed, because a lot of times, in fact, we know in the city of Chicago, 40% of all evictions do not result in judgments against the tenant. In fact, we know because of the racial impact of eviction that if a landlord denies someone a house just because a case was filed, they're probably acting illegally and against fair housing. For a tenant, check the public record of case filings. We've been doing a lot of work on sealing old eviction records, and it's sad how many cases we find where the tenant isn't aware of the old eviction record until a credit report is run. And they've wasted the money for the credit report, and they're probably not going to get the housing. So check your credit, check the public access. You may be eligible to have that record sealed. You can contact us. Again, the contact information will be available.
We'll have to leave it there. My thanks to Dennis Horton and Michelle Gilbert for joining us.
Thank
you
you
for having us.
Back with more Chicago Tonight right after this. And now we check back in with Joanna Hernandez, who spent the day in the East Side community as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Joanna.
Hello, we're now here with Inés Ornelas. She is the owner of Tochi La Diosa. She's also a longtime resident and an elementary school teacher here. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate that.
So I want to start off. Can you tell me a little bit about your business and the concept behind it?
Sure. Tochi La Diosa is a collective of business owners. I currently have 12 business owners from the community. We're a collective, so we work together to build up. I give them a space for their merchandise. And more than that, we have painting parties, we have bingo, we have workshops, so many things are in the works too. I'm gonna invite a bunch of artists from the community to come and create a mural within the store. A lot of stuff.
What was your inspiration? I mean, you're a teacher as well. What was that mindset? I want to open a business in the community.
So, because I am a teacher, I wanted to build community. As an educator, you never stop. In the beginning, when everything was going on, all my students were coming in and they're like, oh, Miss Ornelas, that's your store. And it's like their whole concept changed, like their vision of what can be in their lives coming from such a small neighborhood changed, and that's what I teach them. You can be so much more. You can leave the community if you want, but you can stay and build it up also, and their mentality really changed, and, just like their vision of what could be, it expanded, so.
And as a teacher in the community and a resident here, what are some things that you would say the community still needs?
Oh my God, we need more arts programs, we need more funding for businesses, more education, totally to educate them so they know what it takes to become a business owner. I'm in the works with that too, giving more networking workshops for them so they know what it takes to have an LLC, to have an insurance, all the taxes here in the city of Chicago. It is difficult to maintain a small business here, and just letting them know what it entails so they're prepared when they undertake that endeavor.
And this is mostly a Latino community, correct?
It is mostly I'm 90%, assuming, we've grown a lot.
And I can only imagine that having a business during the pandemic was tough.
Yes, so I am a single mom. So when, we were getting our stimulus checks, that's when I decided I need to build, the income. I need to build for my daughter. So that was, the whole passion and vision behind it. What legacy can I give her? And this is what it came to, so.
And for the people who don't come to the East Side, what is something that you want to tell them about the community?
So we are hardworking, artists, talented, passionate. We're here, come and visit. I'm always opening my doors for new businesses. So if you're looking for a place to showcase your merchandise, come. I have space for everybody, and we're very open to that.
Do you see that more people want to open businesses in the area?
Oh, most definitely. They're amazing, just their thoughts, and they're artists. I see them all as artists because they're creators. If you come to the store, most of the stuff is handmade. I mean, it's created by them, and they put so much love, into what they do, and, it's unique. Not something you're going to find like at a you know, big chain stores. So,
yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
tonight.
you so much.
And Brandis, I hear that you have a question for me.
I do have a question for you. Tochi La Diosa, that's a very cute business that she's got there. But, you know, before we let you go, you spoke to several families in the East Side community. Were there any, you know, shared experiences among the families that caught your attention?
You know, Brandis, I think one of the main things that I took away was that everyone that I spoke with had a generation line when it comes to migrating here because of the factories. Their fathers worked in the factories. They migrated here because they wanted to work in the factories. So that's something that I really noticed throughout the day that I spent here. So they're really invested in this community.
All right, they call it home, I'm sure. Joanna Hernandez in East Side, thanks so much. Paul Cezanne was thought of as the greatest by some very great artists, Pablo Picasso and Claude Monet, just to name two. The Art Institute, along with the Tate Modern in London, is presenting its first exhibition of Cezanne in 70 years. Producer Mark Vitale recently met the curators at the museum. Here's another look.
Bathing beauties, rich landscapes, seemingly simple still lifes, and complicated portraits. And stranger things. The Cezanne show at the Art Institute looks from a distance and very closely at a giant of modern art.
He was coming of age in the 19th century. He was associated with the Impressionist group, but he really paved the way for what modern art would become in the 20th century. Movements like Cubism, Fauvism, Expressionism, abstract painting.
Well, Cezanne's an artist we usually put in a separate category. We put him in another gallery, literally, because he doesn't play well with Monet and Sisley and Renoir. He's like the odd man out, but he is very much informed by Impressionism. He has his moment, but he takes what he needs and he moves on.
Cezanne was much admired by fellow artists. In fact, many paintings on view were once owned by them. This canvas belonged to Pablo Picasso.
Artists understood what he was doing. They were absolutely the most important audience for his work during his lifetime. There were works that were owned by Monet, Pissarro, Gauguin, and then in the 20th century you have works owned by Matisse, Picasso, Henry Moore, many loans from the collection of artist Jasper Johns. So, I mean, it's something that continues, and in the exhibition and catalog, we worked with 10 contemporary artists to look at artworks in the show and help us see them through an artist's eyes now.
Cezanne really was trying to be modern, and he was trying to fit in, and he can't. And it was when he refuses to fit in and when he starts working for himself for an audience of one that he becomes the artist that the artists look at and go, oh my gosh, he's such a risk taker.
One of the wonderful things about Cezanne's work is that he's so honest about his process. You can really see how the picture came together, stroke by stroke, mark by mark, sensation by sensation, color by color, associating sight and touch, and using that as the basis of an entirely new language, really, of pictorial communication.
It's a lot, and it's also very minimalist. And even in the subject matters of still life, landscape, and portrait, it's kind of limited, but it's within that he makes all of his completely new and different expressions.
Many figures and objects are outlined in cobalt blue. A white tablecloth might contain greens and yellows. Colors bleed into each other, and perspectives are often skewed. Infrared examination gave the curators a look at the underdrawings of the paintings and revealed how Cezanne planned his compositions.
In the end, he's going back and forth between fantasy, between observation, between different ways of approaching a painting.
It's a really special thing to have 125 Cezanne works together. We take you through the entirety of his career, from the mid-1860s all the way to the end of his life in 1906. I think there's a chance to really appreciate, the extent of Cezanne's commitment to finding a new way of painting, and to understand that while these works are more than 100 years old, they absolutely are still full of mystery and surprise. Really, his life's work was creating the paintings and watercolors that we see here, and they just set the tone for an entirely new mode of painting in the 20th century.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
And you can catch the Cezanne retrospective at the Art Institute of Chicago through this Labor Day Monday. Then it reopens in October at the Tate Modern in London, in case you're in London. Back to wrap things up right after this.
Don't ever miss Chicago Tonight. Subscribe to our podcast. Get a daily download of our show delivered to your desktop or mobile device. Go to WTTW.com/Chicago Tonight Podcast and subscribe.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.